Alright, guys, so I'm having a dilemma trying to make a very important decision. I can't decide what mug to get. I don't know. Anyway, we'll just leave that dramatic situation to itself. So I have reviewed this movie once before, back in 2016, when I fulfilled my promise to review, the movie when it came out and the book. So I've already done this, sort of. Because there is... What I spoke about in that review was spoiler free. And, this movie has been out for almost 2 years now, so there's a lot that... there's a lot more to talk about. Mainly with Zemo's plan and the complaints about the coincidence, the coincidences surrounding his plan. But I thought I might touch on that, give my 2 cents. So that's what I'm going to start off the review with. Okay, so the movie starts off with the Avengers on a mission in Lagos, Nigeria, which ultimately ends with some very tragic collateral damage that sparks a reaction by the world's leaders to officially legalize the Avengers by forcing them to sign the Sokovia Accords, which basically allows the United Nations to control the Avengers. And if Zemo hadn't intervened, then those who signed these Sokovia Accords would still be Avengers, and those who didn't sign wouldn't be Avengers. Now, this is where it admittedly gets a little complicated. We first see Zemo asking a ex-Hydra agent for the details of a specific mission that took place in 1991. And because that agent didn't disclose the information, Zemo then bombed the UN and had Bucky framed for it, which Zemo knew would lead to his arrest, so he infiltrated the government facility where Bucky was being held and got the information out of him instead. We later learned the details of the mission from Bucky, revealing that Hydra successfully recreated 5 more Winter Soldiers, and that if Zemo were to use these soldiers, he'd be capable of taking down an entire country or countries. This is, of course, a very dangerous threat for the Avengers to defeat, but seeing as half of them signed the Accords and are controlled by the United Nations, they're unable to assist. Captain America, with Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, decide to stop Zemo and assemble their own team of Avengers with the likes of Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Ant-Man. And now keep in mind that Team Cap, their sole mission was to stop Zemo in the first place, right? Because none of them signed the Accords, so they're technically outside of the law and therefore have to be arrested. But the only ones capable of doing that are the other Avengers. So Stark and Romanoff assemble their own team of Avengers, which include War Machine, Vision, Black Panther, and Spider-Man. This all, of course, ends up in a fight between the two, which ends with Cap and Bucky escaping the fight to stop Zemo. And when the truth about the UN bombing is released over the news, Iron Man then follows them to their destination, which is where we find out that Zemo never intended to use these other 5 Winter Soldiers. A much more sinister plan was in play. That plan being to reveal the truth of Bucky's mission in 1991 to Tony Stark. Now, the most common complaint about this is that how could Zemo have known that Cap would assemble his own team, or that the Avengers would fight, or that the news would report Bucky's innocence, or that Cap, Bucky, and Iron Man would end up in the same place at the same time? Right? The most common complaint is how could he have predicted all that and planned for that? Well, the truth is, he didn't. Because he would have had another way, a plan A, as it were, of how to reveal the truth of Bucky's mission in 1991. So I don't think Zemo's plan was to lead them to the abandoned Hydra facility. I don't think that was his plan. It just sort of happened. So I'll admit there is a lot of coincidence that happens in this movie. But when you really look at it, when you really focus on it and analyze it, not too much of it is coincidence, and even if it is, it makes sense realistically. Realistically, these things would happen, I guess. I don't know. I'm just trying my best to defend this movie because I love it so much, and I love the characters. And speaking of those characters, I'm going to move on to them now. For the most part, for most of them, I was happy. I loved all of them. And most of them had clear motivations. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Tony Stark. His motivations were clear, but to me still don't suit the character of Tony Stark. I said this in my first review for this movie. It's so weird that I reviewed the movie twice. But anyway, I said this in that review that his motivations are clear and make sense, but they don't suit the character of Tony Stark. They don't line up with him as a character. And I explained it in that review, so I'm not going to go over it. But one thing I didn't say in that review, which I will say now, is that I'm happy that they didn't give Tony Stark anxiety attacks or visions of aliens invading, because we know what that is leading to. Infinity War, right? And they've been sort of teasing this in Iron Man 3 and Avengers Age of Ultron with the vision that he had of all the Avengers dead. So I'm just glad that they didn't include that in this movie, because then it allows me personally as a viewer to look at this movie as its own movie, right? And not having to think about other future movies, right? This movie, what the Russo brothers have done with this movie and what they said they wanted to do is just make this movie and that's it. Like, they are going to make other movies in the MCU like Infinity War, but with this, they everything that happens is just in this movie. Now, with Captain America, his motivations are very clear. As clear and as, makes just as much sense as Tony's motivations, because Cap's motivations are more personal. And also, his side of the argument with the Sokovia Accords makes sense. What if there's a place, and this is, okay, he said in the movie, what if there's a place that we need to go, or if there's a threat that we need to stop, and we know that we're the only ones who can stop it, and yet we have to answer to the United Nations, and they tell us not to act. What if by us not acting, we lose? The world loses. That's basically what he was saying. That's what he was getting at. And that's a pretty damn good point. So there are good points on both sides of the arguments concerning the Accords, but with Steve, we understand him even more because his motivations, his motivations for fighting the other Avengers, who are his friends, so you're going to need pretty damn good motivations for it, is that his friend Bucky is in the line of fire. And he knows Bucky is innocent. So it's basically him trying to protect his friend, but also stop Zemo. Alrighty, so there are two characters in this movie that get introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe through this movie, in this one movie, that of Black Panther and Spider-Man. Black Panther surprised the hell out of me when I first saw this movie. He has a full character arc in this movie. It all makes sense. His father dies. The world thinks it's Bucky. Black Panther then has a target. He chooses Iron Man's side, and la-di-da-di-da. It all makes sense. Black Panther's motivations are, in comparison to everyone else's motivations, are so clear. I completely understand it, and it just makes sense. Now, with the other character that got introduced into this movie, Spider-Man, his motivations don't make any sense. And I don't think he has any motivations. I think he just... The truth of it is that he joined because the company really wanted Spider-Man to join the cinematic universe. I'm glad that he did. And it's not like his introduction to this movie is bad. It's in by no means bad, but again, he has no real motivations to join the fight. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Anything else I have to say about Spider-Man, I will say in my Spider-Man Homecoming review. I don't want to say too much about him because I just love Spider-Man Homecoming, so I'll keep all my thoughts on Spider-Man for that. There are some characters, though, in this movie, like their motivations aren't clear. Like, they don't make sense, they're not clear. For example, Hawkeye and Ant-Man. These two are fathers, right? They have families. One is an ex-assassin and one is a ex-criminal. And they are joining the fight. But why? Like, I get one could argue that they are doing it for the greater good, with stopping Zemo. It's just, if they would have had a personal motivation, then that would have been more understandable. But their motivations aren't clear because I don't know. I'm not saying it has to be personal. I'm just saying, like, they have families, and realistically, people would not join a fight like that if they had a family to look after. But overall, okay, most of the Avengers in Civil War, their motivations are clear. It all makes sense. And even if their motivations aren't clear, even if their motivations are complete batshit crazy, I don't care. I just love the characters themselves. I don't know what it is about this movie. It's like some of it, like a little bit of it doesn't make sense. Most of it does. But that little bit that doesn't make sense is annoying when you think about it. But I just love this movie and the characters within it so much, I don't even care. This movie is entertaining, but it also just has, I don't know. I think this is why I like it, and why so many other people like it, is because this is a Civil War movie. The Avengers are fighting one another. And how the movie could have turned out is we are watching these guys fight, and we don't feel anything. We don't feel a part of the fight. But it is done in such a way, the movie is done in such a way that we do feel like we're a part of the fight, and we are kind of like having an internal conflict within ourselves. But I don't know what it is. It just resonates with me. And that's why I like it. I love it, actually. I love it. And I cannot decide between Winter Soldier or Civil War. I think I just love them equally. But that's the end of this review. Sorry that this one was a little longer than others. But I will see you in my review for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3. Oh boy. I'll tell you something. Those Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reviews get long. So I apologize in advance. Anyway, see ya!